What happens when you declare your affair partner will always be part of your life, no matter what your husband says? How far can a betrayed spouse legally go to protect himself and his child? And what does it feel like to have your lies exposed in front of everyone? The day those legal papers landed on my doorstep, I realized my husband wasn't the fool I thought he was. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Eulalia Vexley, and I'm 32 years old. I work as an insurance claims analyst, spending my days buried in paperwork and phone calls with people whose lives have been turned upside down by accidents and disasters. It's boring work, but it pays the bills. My husband Malcolm is 35, a high school teacher who comes home every day with stories about teenagers and their drama. We've been married for 12 years, and we have a 9-year-old daughter named Nora. For the longest time, I thought my life was just ordinary. Malcolm would wake up at 6:30 every morning, make his coffee, read the news on his tablet, and head off to school. I'd get Nora ready, drop her off, and drive to my office, where I'd spend 8 hours processing claims and dealing with adjusters. Evenings were homework help, dinner, maybe a movie if we were feeling adventurous. Weekends were grocery shopping, household chores, and family time. It wasn't a bad life exactly, but it wasn't exciting either. Malcolm is the kind of man who plans everything 3 weeks in advance. He keeps spreadsheets for our budget, our vacation planning, even our weekly meal prep. He's methodical, careful, and completely predictable. Some women would find that comforting. I found it suffocating. That's when I met Callum Finch. Cal was everything Malcolm wasn't. At 31, he had the kind of energy that filled a room. He was a personal trainer at the gym I joined in January, part of my New Year's resolution to get in better shape. Where Malcolm was quiet and reserved, Cal was loud and encouraging. Where Malcolm planned every detail, Cal was spontaneous and fun. "You've got so much potential, Eulalia," Cal would say during our training sessions. "I can see the real you trying to break free." Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. The real me. When was the last time Malcolm had seen the real me? When was the last time he'd made me feel like I had potential for anything beyond processing insurance claims and packing school lunches? The gym became my escape. I started going 5 times a week instead of 3, then 6. I told Malcolm I was serious about my fitness goals, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was getting stronger, losing weight, feeling better about myself, but the real draw wasn't the exercise, it was Cal. "You're glowing lately," my mother Vivian said during one of our weekly phone calls. "What's your secret?" "Just taking better care of myself, Mum. You know, putting myself first for once." "Good for you, honey. You've spent too many years catering to Malcolm and that household. A woman needs to think about her own happiness." My mother had never been Malcolm's biggest fan. She thought he was boring, too serious, not ambitious enough. She'd wanted me to marry someone with more flash, more money, more excitement. Cal definitely fit that description better than my quiet, steady husband. The first time Cal and I grabbed coffee after a workout, I told myself it was just friendly conversation. We talked about fitness, about goals, about dreams. He listened in a way that made me feel heard, really heard, for the first time in years. "Your husband doesn't appreciate what he has," Cal said, shaking his head. "If you were my woman, I'd make sure you knew how special you are every single day." I felt my cheeks flush. "Cal, I'm married." "I know, and I respect that. But friendship doesn't have boundaries, does it? We're just friends, Eulalia. Really good friends." Friends, that's what I told myself as our coffee dates became more frequent. That's what I told Malcolm when he started asking questions about my extended gym sessions. "Who's this Cal person you keep mentioning?" Malcolm asked one evening as I was getting ready for another workout. "He's my trainer, Malcolm. We've talked about this. He's helping me reach my fitness goals." Your sessions are supposed to be an hour. You've been gone for 3 hours the last 2 times. I felt a flash of irritation. This was exactly the kind of controlling behavior that drove me crazy. We grab coffee afterward sometimes. He gives me nutrition advice, helps me plan my workouts for the week. Is that a problem? Malcolm was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with those careful brown eyes of his. No, he said finally. I just want to make sure you're being safe. Safe, as if I were a child who couldn't take care of herself. As if I couldn't have a friendship without his supervision. I'm fine, Malcolm. Cal is a good friend, and he's helping me become a better version of myself. I thought you'd be happy about that. I am happy. You look great. You seem more energetic. Just what? He shook his head. Nothing. Have a good workout. But I could see it in his eyes. Suspicion. Doubt. The same look he got when he was grading papers and found an answer that didn't quite add up. That night, as I lay in bed next to my sleeping husband, my phone buzzed with a text from Cal. Had such a great time talking with you today. You're an amazing woman, Eulalia. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I smiled in the darkness, feeling that familiar flutter of excitement. Cal saw me. He appreciated me. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Malcolm stirred beside me, and I quickly turned my phone face down on the nightstand. But not before I saw him open his eyes slightly, just for a moment, watching me in the dim light. I told myself he was just being paranoid. Cal and I were friends. Close friends, maybe, but friends nonetheless. There was nothing wrong with having someone in my life who made me feel special, who reminded me that I was more than just a wife and mother and insurance analyst. Cal was staying in my life, no matter what Malcolm thought about it. He was my friend, my confidant, my reminder that I deserved happiness and excitement and passion. I had no idea that Malcolm was already planning his response. The lies started small, little white lies, really, the kind that every married person tells to avoid unnecessary drama. I'm meeting Cal for a quick coffee after my workout became, I'm running errands after the gym. Cal thinks I should try that new restaurant downtown became, I heard good things about that new place downtown. Cal says I'm making amazing progress became, I'm really seeing results from all this hard work. It wasn't that I was hiding anything serious. Cal and I were just friends. But Malcolm had this way of making everything feel like an interrogation, and I was tired of defending every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of connection I had with someone who actually appreciated me. The shift happened gradually. Coffee after workouts became lunch dates. Lunch dates became dinner when Malcolm was working late on lesson plans. Dinner became long walks through the park, talking about everything and nothing, feeling more connected to Cal than I had to my own husband in years. You light up when you talk about your dreams, Cal said one evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the pond. When was the last time Malcolm made you feel that way? I couldn't remember. Malcolm and I talked about practical things, bills, schedules, Nora's school events, his lesson plans, my insurance cases. When had we stopped talking about dreams? He's not really a dreamer, I said. He's more of a planner. There's a difference between planning for the future and actually living, you know? You're too vibrant, too full of life to be stuck in some boring routine forever. The way Cal looked at me when he said things like that made my heart race. He saw potential in me that I'd forgotten existed. With Malcolm, I felt like a wife, a mother, a household manager. With Cal, I felt like a woman. That's when I made my first real mistake. I invited Cal to join Malcolm and me for dinner at Bistro Cafe, our usual Friday night spot. I told myself it was innocent, just introducing my friend to my husband, being open and honest about my friendship. Malcolm agreed, though I could see the tension in his shoulders when I mentioned it. So this is the famous Cal, Malcolm said when we met at the restaurant. He extended his hand with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Cal's handshake was firm, confident. Malcolm, I've heard so much about you. Eulalia's always talking about what a dedicated teacher you are." That was a lie. I rarely mentioned Malcolm during my time with Cal, and when I did, it wasn't usually complimentary. But Cal had this way of saying things that sounded sincere, even when they weren't entirely true. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Cal was charming, asking Malcolm about his work, sharing funny stories from the gym, complimenting the food. But as the evening wore on, I noticed subtle things that made me uncomfortable. When Malcolm mentioned a student who was struggling with algebra, Cal said, "Man, I could never do that job. Dealing with other people's kids all day, for what they pay teachers. You're a saint." The comment stung, though Cal delivered it with a smile. Malcolm's jaw tightened slightly, but he just nodded. When I mentioned a difficult insurance case I'd been working on, Malcolm started to respond with advice, but Cal cut him off. "See, this is what I love about Eulalia. She's so smart, so capable. She could probably run that whole office if they gave her the chance." It was a compliment, but it felt like a criticism of Malcolm's response. Like Cal was saying Malcolm didn't appreciate my intelligence the way he did. The worst moment came when Malcolm excused himself to use the restroom. Cal immediately leaned closer to me, his hand brushing mine on the table. "He doesn't deserve you," Cal said quietly. "I hope you know that." "Cal, don't—" "I'm just saying, you're an incredible woman. You deserve someone who sees that every day, who makes you feel as amazing as you are." When Malcolm returned, he looked between us with those careful, calculating eyes. I could see him processing the body language, the way Cal had leaned back casually when he approached, the flush in my cheeks. "Everything okay?" Malcolm asked. "Perfect," Cal said with a grin. "Just telling Eulalia how lucky you are." But Malcolm wasn't stupid. He could sense the undercurrent, the tension, the way Cal looked at me like he wanted to devour me whole. The drive home was silent until we were almost at our house. "I don't like him," Malcolm said quietly. "What? Why? He was perfectly nice." "He was hitting on you, right in front of me." I felt a surge of anger. "That's ridiculous, Malcolm. Cal is my friend. Just because you don't understand how to have a normal conversation with people doesn't mean everyone is hitting on me. A normal conversation doesn't involve telling another man's wife that he doesn't deserve her." My stomach dropped. He'd heard that. "You were eavesdropping." I was coming back from the bathroom and heard him. "Eulalia, this isn't appropriate. This friendship, or whatever it is, needs to end." "Excuse me?" I turned to face him fully, fury building in my chest. "You don't get to decide who I'm friends with, Malcolm. Cal is one of the few people in my life who actually supports me, who believes in me, who makes me feel good about myself. I'm not giving that up because you're insecure." "I'm not insecure. I'm concerned. About you, about us, about Nora." "What does Nora have to do with anything?" Malcolm pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. "She's been asking me why Mommy is always at the gym, why you're always on your phone, why you seem angry all the time when you're home." That hit me like a slap. I'm not angry all the time. "Aren't you? When was the last time you seemed genuinely happy to be here, with us, without checking your phone every 5 minutes?" I wanted to argue, but the words stuck in my throat, because he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been distracted lately, impatient with the routine, eager to escape to the gym, to Cal, to the version of myself that felt alive and desired and appreciated. "Maybe I'd be happier at home if home felt less like a prison," I said finally. Malcolm stared at me for a long moment. "Is that really how you feel?" "Sometimes. Yes." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away somewhere important. "I see. Malcolm, I didn't mean—" "No, I'm glad you're being honest. It's good to know where we stand." He got out of the car and walked into the house, leaving me sitting in the passenger seat, suddenly feeling like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. That night, as Malcolm graded papers at the kitchen table, I got a text from Cal. "Your husband seems like a good guy, but I can see why you feel trapped. You're meant for so much more than this suburban life." Don't let anyone dim your light. I glanced over at Malcolm, hunched over his papers, red pen in hand, completely absorbed in his work. When had he stopped looking at me the way Cal did? When had I become just another item on his to-do list? I texted back, "Thank you for seeing me. For real me. Always. You're incredible, Eulalia. Don't forget that." Malcolm looked up from his papers, catching me smiling at my phone. Our eyes met across the kitchen, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his expression. It wasn't anger or jealousy. It was disappointment. And somehow, that felt worse than any argument we could have had. The lies got bigger after that dinner. They had to. Malcolm started paying attention in ways he never had before. He noticed when I left for the gym and when I came home. He asked specific questions about my workouts, about Cal's training methods, about why I needed so many sessions per week. "I'm just trying to understand your new routine," he said, when I accused him of being controlling. "You're gone 15 hours a week now. That's more time than some people spend at a part-time job." "It's not just workouts, Malcolm. Cal is helping me with nutrition planning, lifestyle changes, goal setting. It's a comprehensive approach to wellness." That part was true, technically. Cal and I did talk about those things. We also talked about movies, books, our childhoods, our dreams, our frustrations with our current lives. We talked about everything except the growing attraction between us that was becoming harder to ignore. The first time Cal kissed me, I told myself it didn't count. We were saying goodbye after coffee, and he leaned in for what I thought was a friendly hug, but his lips brushed against mine, soft and warm and full of promise. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back slightly. "I couldn't help myself. You're just so beautiful, Eulalia." I should have stopped it there. Should have said it was inappropriate, that I was married, that we needed to maintain boundaries. Instead, I kissed him back. It was just a moment, maybe 30 seconds. But in those 30 seconds, I felt more alive than I had in years. My whole body buzzed with electricity, with desire, with the thrill of being wanted so desperately by someone who saw me as more than just a wife and mother. "We can't," I whispered against his lips. "I know," he whispered back, "but God, I wish we could." That night, I lay awake next to Malcolm, replaying that kiss over and over. The guilt was there, sharp and uncomfortable, but it was overshadowed by something else. Excitement. For the first time in years, I felt desired, alive, like a woman instead of just a household appliance. Malcolm stirred beside me. "Can't sleep?" "Just thinking about work stuff." Another lie. They were coming easier now. The next day at my insurance office, my coworker Janet Lewis noticed my distraction. "You seem different lately," she said, perching on the edge of my desk. "Happier. New workout routine really paying off." "Something like that." "Must be some trainer. You're practically glowing." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Was it that obvious? "Speaking of work," Janet continued, "I noticed you've been putting in a lot of overtime lately. The building logs show you here until 8 or 9 some nights, but I never see you when I leave at 6. My stomach clenched. "I've been working on the Morrison case. You know how complicated those commercial claims can be." Janet nodded, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. The truth was, I'd been falsifying my timesheets, claiming overtime hours I wasn't actually working so I could spend more time with Cal without arousing Malcolm's suspicion. If he thought I was working late, he wouldn't question why I wasn't home for dinner. The overtime pay was a nice bonus too. I'd been using it to buy new clothes, to pay for my gym membership, to cover the cost of all those coffee and dinner dates with Cal. Money that Malcolm thought was coming from legitimate work was actually funding my emotional affair. "Just be careful not to burn yourself out," Janet said. "All work and no play, you know?" If only she knew how much play I was actually getting. That evening, I told Malcolm I had to work late again. The Morrison case was heating up, I explained, and I needed to review some files before my meeting with the adjuster tomorrow. "Again?" Malcolm asked. "That's the 3rd time this week." It's a big case, Malcolm. You know how these things go. He studied my face with that careful expression I was getting used to. Maybe I should bring you dinner, keep you company. Panic fluttered in my chest. That's sweet, but I'll probably be in meetings most of the evening. Rain check. Malcolm nodded slowly. Sure, I'll keep a plate warm for you. Instead of going to the office, I met Cal at a new restaurant across town. We'd been talking about trying it for weeks, and tonight felt like the perfect opportunity. You look incredible, Cal said when I arrived. He'd reserved a corner table, intimate and private, away from the main dining area. Thank you. I bought this dress last week. It was black, fitted, more daring than anything I'd worn in years. The kind of dress that made me feel sexy and confident and alive. Malcolm's a lucky man, Cal said, but his eyes said he wished Malcolm weren't in the picture at all. Dinner was amazing. We talked and laughed and flirted openly, no longer pretending this was just friendship. Cal reached across the table to touch my hand, traced circles on my palm with his finger, looked at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. I think about you constantly, he said as we shared dessert. When I wake up, when I'm training other clients, when I go to bed at night, you're always on my mind. Cal, I know you feel it too. This connection between us. It's not just friendship, Eulalia. It's something deeper, something real. He was right. What I felt for Cal was intense, consuming, unlike anything I'd experienced in my marriage. With Malcolm, love felt comfortable, predictable, safe. With Cal, it felt dangerous and exciting and absolutely essential. I'm married, I said, but the words felt hollow. Are you happy? The question hung between us like a challenge. Was I happy? When was the last time Malcolm had looked at me the way Cal was looking at me now? When was the last time I'd felt this rush of desire, this desperate need to be close to someone? It's complicated. It doesn't have to be. Life's too short to settle for comfortable when you could have extraordinary. When I got home that night at nearly 10 o'clock, Malcolm was waiting up. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a manila folder. How was work? He asked without looking up. Exhausting. The Morrison case is more complex than we thought. He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. I called your office around 7:30. Wanted to see if you needed me to bring you anything. My heart stopped. Oh? Janet answered. Said you'd left at your usual time, around 5:15. The room felt like it was spinning. I went to grab dinner first, before going back to work on the files at home. Malcolm finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Not anger, not hurt. Something much worse. Knowledge. What files, Eulalia? You didn't bring any files home. I looked around frantically, realizing he was right. I'd been so focused on my story about working late that I'd forgotten to actually bring work home to support the lie. I have digital copies on my laptop. Your laptop that's been sitting on the counter, closed, since this morning. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, the weight of my lies hanging heavy between us. I could see Malcolm processing everything, the false overtime, the inconsistent stories, my new clothes, my distraction, my obvious deception. Where were you tonight, Eulalia? For a moment, I considered telling him the truth, confessing everything, explaining about Cal, about how lonely I'd been, about how alive he made me feel. But the truth felt too dangerous, too explosive. I told you. Working. Malcolm nodded slowly and closed the folder. Okay, I'm going to bed. He stood up and walked past me toward the stairs, then stopped. By the way, Nora asked me today why you don't eat dinner with us anymore. I told her Mommy was working hard to help people with their insurance problems. I hope that's still true. After he went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen, my phone buzzing with a text from Cal. Can't stop thinking about tonight. You're amazing, Eulalia. Sweet dreams. I looked up at the ceiling, knowing Malcolm was somewhere above me, probably lying awake, probably thinking about my lies and what they meant for our marriage. For the first time, I wondered if I was in over my head. The confrontation happened on a Thursday night at Bistro Cafe, the same restaurant where Malcolm had first met Cal. I should have seen it coming, should have recognized the signs that my carefully constructed lies were crumbling around me. But I was too caught up in the thrill of my secret life to pay attention to the warning signals. Cal had suggested we meet for dinner to celebrate my promotion, another lie I'd told, to explain my increased overtime pay and frequent absences. In reality, I was still processing the same insurance claims I'd been handling for years, but Cal didn't need to know that. He thought I was moving up in the world, becoming the successful, independent woman he believed I could be. "You deserve this," Cal said, raising his wine glass in a toast. "You've worked so hard, put up with so much. It's time for good things to come your way." I clinked my glass against his, feeling that familiar rush of validation. Cal saw my potential in ways Malcolm never had. He believed in me, encouraged me, made me feel like I could conquer the world. "I couldn't have done it without your support," I said. "You've changed my life, Cal, made me remember who I really am." "You did that yourself. I just reminded you how incredible you are." We were sitting close together in a corner booth, Cal's hand resting on mine on the table. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple celebrating a milestone, which, in a way, we were. This felt like the beginning of something new, something that could reshape my entire future. That's when I saw Malcolm. He was standing near the entrance, scanning the restaurant, his face calm but his eyes sharp and focused. When his gaze found me, sitting intimately with Cal, something shifted in his expression. "Shit," I whispered, pulling my hand away from Cal's. "What's wrong?" Cal turned to follow my gaze and saw Malcolm approaching our table. "Oh, your husband." Malcolm walked over with measured steps, like he was approaching a classroom of unruly students. When he reached our table, he stood there for a moment, looking between Cal and me. "Hello, Eulalia, Cal." "Malcolm," I said, my voice higher than usual. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for my wife. You said you were working late again. The Morrison case, I believe." My mouth went dry. I finished early. Cal and I were just celebrating her promotion," Cal interjected smoothly. "She's been working so hard lately, she deserves to unwind." Malcolm's eyes narrowed slightly. "Promotion? That's interesting. I called your office this afternoon to congratulate you. Janet said she hadn't heard anything about a promotion." The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. I could feel other diners starting to notice our conversation, the tension crackling between the three of us. "It's not official yet," I said quickly. "I probably shouldn't have said anything." "Right." Malcolm pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something. "You know what else is interesting? Your overtime reports." My heart started pounding. "What about them?" "I did a little research, called the building management company that handles your office complex. They keep electronic logs of after-hours access. Your keycard hasn't been used after 6 p.m. in over 2 months. The blood drained from my face. Cal shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Malcolm, you're making a scene," I hissed, glancing around at the other diners who were now openly staring. "Am I? I'm just trying to understand where my wife has been spending her evenings, since it's clearly not at work." Cal stood up abruptly. "Look, man, I think you need to calm down. You're embarrassing your wife." "I'm embarrassing her." Malcolm's voice remained level, but I could see the anger building behind his careful control. "My wife has been lying to me for months, claiming to work overtime she's never actually worked, stealing money from our family budget to fund secret dinners with another man, and I'm the one embarrassing her." "Hey, back off," Cal said, stepping closer to Malcolm. "Eulalia is an adult. She can spend time with whoever she wants." "Not when she's lying about it. Not when she's using our daughter's college fund to pay for hotel rooms." "Hotel rooms?" My stomach dropped. How did he know about the hotel rooms? "What hotel rooms?" Cal asked, looking at me with confusion. Malcolm smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Oh, she didn't tell you. Your friend here has been charging hotel stays to our joint credit card. The Grand Plaza, mostly. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, right after her gym sessions." I felt like I was going to be sick. Those hotel charges were from months ago, before I'd started seeing Cal. I'd been meeting another trainer from a different gym, someone whose name I'd never even told Cal. It had only lasted a few weeks before I'd ended it, feeling guilty and confused. But Malcolm didn't know that, and from the look on Cal's face, he was putting together a picture that wasn't entirely accurate. "You've been seeing someone else?" Cal asked, his voice cold. "Cal, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been playing both of us? That everything you told me about your marriage, about feeling trapped and unappreciated, was just a line?" "That's not true. Cal, please." But Cal was already grabbing his jacket, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I don't need this drama. Find yourself another trainer, Eulalia, and another friend." He stormed toward the exit, leaving me alone with Malcolm and a restaurant full of curious onlookers. Several people had their phones out, and I realized with horror that they were recording. "Please," I said to Malcolm, my voice barely a whisper. "Can we go home and talk about this privately?" "Why? So you can lie to me some more? Tell me more stories about working late and celebrating promotions that don't exist?" "Malcolm, please. People are watching." "Let them watch. Maybe it's time everyone knew what kind of person my wife really is." He pulled out his phone again and started reading from the screen. 3 months of false overtime claims, $1,800 in unauthorized hotel charges, 47 dinner receipts from restaurants across town, none of which you ever mentioned to me. "How do you have all this?" "I've been documenting everything, Eulalia. Every lie, every inconsistency, every dollar you've stolen from our family. Did you think I was stupid? Did you think I wouldn't notice?" The restaurant had gone almost completely quiet now. Even the servers had stopped what they were doing to watch our confrontation unfold. "You're humiliating me," I said, tears starting to form in my eyes. "You humiliated yourself. You humiliated our marriage, our family, our daughter. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." "What about Nora? What about our family?" Malcolm's expression softened slightly at the mention of our daughter. "Nora deserves better than this. She deserves a mother who doesn't lie, who doesn't steal, who doesn't sneak around with other men while pretending to be working. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen, and now we have to deal with the consequences." He turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at me one more time. "By the way, I've already contacted a lawyer and your HR department. They're very interested in your overtime claims." As Malcolm walked out of the restaurant, I sat alone in the booth, surrounded by strangers with their phones pointed at me, recording my complete and utter humiliation. Within hours, videos of our confrontation were all over social media. "Cheating wife exposed by husband at restaurant" was trending on TikTok. My face, my lies, my shame, all of it broadcast to thousands of strangers who delighted in watching someone else's life fall apart. But the worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was the realization that Malcolm had been quietly, methodically gathering evidence against me for months. While I thought he was being passive and clueless, he'd been building a case, and I had given him everything he needed to destroy me. The fallout was swift and devastating. By Friday morning, the videos from Bistro Cafe had been viewed over 50,000 times. My face was plastered across social media with captions like "Insurance scammer caught cheating" and "Husband exposes wife's lies in epic takedown." The comments were brutal, dissecting every aspect of my appearance, my behavior, my marriage. But the online humiliation was nothing compared to what was happening in my real life. I arrived at work to find my supervisor, Patricia Martinez, waiting at my desk with an HR representative I'd never seen before. "Eulalia, we need to talk," Patricia said, her usually warm demeanor replaced by professional coldness. "Conference room now." The meeting was a nightmare. They had printouts of my timesheets, building access logs, security camera footage showing me leaving at my normal time on days I'd claimed to work late. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. We've calculated approximately 60 hours of fraudulent overtime claims over the past 3 months, the HR representative said. That's $1,800 in wages you're not entitled to, plus the administrative costs of processing false claims. I can explain. Can you? Because this looks like deliberate fraud to us. We're suspending you pending a full investigation. You'll need to surrender your access card and any company property immediately. I cleaned out my desk in a daze, aware that my coworkers were watching and whispering. Janet approached as I was packing my personal items into a cardboard box. I'm sorry, Eulalia. I tried to cover for you when your husband called, but they made me tell them about the access logs. You reported me. They asked direct questions. I couldn't lie to HR. Of course she couldn't. Janet was honest, reliable, trustworthy, everything I used to be before I got caught up in the excitement of my affair. The drive home was a blur of anxiety and dread. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from Cal, some sign that he still cared about me, despite the revelation about the hotel charges. But there was nothing. He'd blocked my number, removed me from social media, erased me from his life as completely as if I'd never existed. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Malcolm's car wasn't there. Neither was Nora's bike, which she usually left on the front lawn. The house felt empty, abandoned. Inside, I found a note on the kitchen counter in Malcolm's careful handwriting. Nora and I are staying at my mother's for a few days. We need space to process everything that's happened. Please don't contact us until you're ready to have an honest conversation about our future. Malcolm. The silence in the house was deafening. For months, I'd been craving freedom from the mundane routine of family life. Now I had it, and it felt like a punishment. My phone rang. My mother. Eulalia, honey, what on earth is going on? Gina Harker just called me, screaming about how you've destroyed her son's life. She said something about cheating and stealing money. I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. It's complicated, Mom. Complicated how? Did you have an affair? Not exactly. It was more of an emotional connection. Malcolm is blowing everything out of proportion. What about the money? Gina mentioned something about fraud. I may have adjusted some timesheets, but it wasn't fraud exactly. I was working hard, just not always in the office. Sometimes I did work from home or thought about work problems while I was out. It's not like I was stealing. There was a long pause. Eulalia, please tell me you didn't actually steal money from your employer. It wasn't stealing. It was overtime pay for overtime work. Just because I wasn't physically in the building doesn't mean I wasn't working. Another pause. Honey, that's not how overtime works. You know that, right? For the first time, hearing my mother's disappointment, I began to understand how serious this was. I'd been telling myself that my actions were justified, that I deserved the money, that Malcolm was being controlling and unreasonable. But sitting alone in my empty house, I started to see how my behavior looked to everyone else. I think I made some mistakes, Mom. Some mistakes. Eulalia, if what Gina is saying is true, you've committed fraud and adultery. Those aren't mistakes, they're crimes. Against your employer and your family. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, and now you need to figure out how to fix it. After we hung up, I tried calling Malcolm. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried texting him, begging him to come home so we could talk, but the messages showed as delivered but unread. I even tried calling his mother's house, but Gina hung up on me the moment she heard my voice. The weekend stretched endlessly. I kept waiting for Malcolm and Nora to come home, for this nightmare to end, for life to go back to normal. But Sunday evening came and went with no word from them. Monday morning brought a new horror. A knock at the door from a process server. Eulalia Vexley? Yes? You've been served. The papers were thick, official. Terrifying. Divorce petition, emergency custody hearing. Restraining order against Cal coming within 500 feet of me or my family. Asset freeze on our joint accounts. But the worst document was the last one. A detailed affidavit Malcolm had submitted to the court, outlining my fraudulent overtime claims, my affair, my lies, my deception, every hotel receipt, every false timesheet, every inconsistent story, all of it documented with the methodical precision I'd once found boring in my husband. There was also a statement from Nora's school counselor describing how my daughter had been acting out in class, seeming anxious and distracted, asking teachers if her parents were getting divorced. The final paragraph of Malcolm's affidavit hit me like a physical blow. I believe my wife poses a risk to our daughter's emotional and financial well-being. She has demonstrated a pattern of deception, fraud, and reckless behavior that makes her unsuitable for shared custody. I am requesting primary custody of our minor child, with supervised visitation for the respondent until she can demonstrate that she has addressed her issues with honesty and financial responsibility. Supervised visitation. He wanted to limit my access to my own daughter because of my affair with Cal. I called every lawyer in the phone book, but most wouldn't take my case once they heard the details. The few who had wanted retainers I couldn't afford, especially with our joint accounts frozen and my job in jeopardy. By Tuesday, the local newspaper had picked up the story. Insurance employees suspended for overtime fraud was a small article on page 3, but it included my name, my employer, and enough details that anyone who knew me would recognize the story. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, reporters, I assumed, or people who'd seen the social media videos and wanted to harass me directly. The only call I answered was from Cal. "This is insane, Eulalia. People are calling my gym, harassing my clients. You need to fix this." "I'm trying, Cal. I never wanted any of this to happen." "Well, it did happen, and now my reputation is trashed because of your drama with your husband. I thought you cared about me." "I cared about the person I thought you were, not someone who lies about everything, who's apparently been seeing other guys behind my back too. That was before I met you. It didn't mean anything. Neither did this, apparently. Don't call me again." The line went dead. That evening, alone in my empty house, I finally understood what Malcolm had been trying to tell me for months. My actions had consequences. My lies had victims. My selfish pursuit of excitement and validation had destroyed not just my marriage, but my career, my reputation, my relationship with my daughter, and the man I'd thrown it all away for wanted nothing to do with me. I was about to learn that Malcolm's revenge was just getting started. The hearing was 6 days away, and the first lawyer I could afford told me the truth. Malcolm's filing was brutal: fraud, lies, spending, the affair, organized like a textbook case for instability. In court, Malcolm's attorney walked the judge through bank records, overtime fraud evidence, hotel receipts, and phone logs. My workplace testified. Even the school counselor described Nora's anxiety and how often I was angry or absent. When I tried to explain it as loneliness and emotional connection, the judge cut through it. Neglect doesn't justify fraud, and hotel charges don't look like just feelings. By the time Malcolm testified, he didn't sound vengeful, just exhausted, saying the breaking point was watching our daughter suffer. The ruling came fast: primary custody to Malcolm, supervised visitation for me until counseling and restitution. As he passed my table, Malcolm paused and said quietly, "I hope you find what you're looking for, but I hope you understand what it cost you to look for it." Then he walked out with the life I'd helped build and I'd thrown away.